Hi, well, I'm here to talk to you about Primodos, which is a documentary which is going out tonight at 9 p.m. It was due to go out on Wednesday, but we've had a few things happen here in Westminster, as you know, and that meant that it's been delayed till tonight. You might have seen it on Sky Atlantic, but if you haven't, let me just tell you a few things about it. So Primodos is a drug. It's been talked about in the papers. We've had quite a few headlines. This is just one of them in the Sunday Telegraph, on the front page, no less. Pregnancy drug linked to birth defects. Evidence emerges of thalidomide-like scandal that affected hundreds of families. And that's all sort of about this documentary, really. We're looking at a drug that was taken as a pregnancy test. I'm happy to take your questions on anything about it to do with the investigation, how we looked into it, who we met, which experts we spoke to, what we think is going to happen next. Any of those things, you can text me, and or you can, I think you just leave a comment, and hopefully I'll be able to get your questions. So let me just tell you a few things about it first of all. So this was a drug that was taken in the 60s and 70s by women, and it was a pill that they swallowed. Now you might ask yourself, well, why would women swallow a pill as a pregnancy test? Because surely they'd just use the urine test. Well, back in the day they didn't do that. What they used to do is, in the 50s, they actually used to send the tests off. They did a urine sample and they'd send it off, and believe it or not, it would be injected into a toad. And if they were pregnant, the toad would actually start to lay eggs. It's extraordinary, really, and we show this in the documentary. And what they just wanted to do was develop a system that was quicker and easier. What we're alleging is that there was a potential that this actual drug could deform the babies in the womb. But what this pill did, functionally, is that when the woman took it, if she wasn't pregnant, she would have a period. If she was pregnant, then she wouldn't have a period. So it would kind of induce a period. And it was used as well for that purpose for women who perhaps weren't regulating properly. So it had other uses, this drug. But it began to be used more and more as a pregnancy test. And it came out around the time of the contraceptive pills, so a lot of people were taking them. But in 1967, there was a Dr. Isabel Gall, who was a paediatrician, and she had noted that when she was looking at spina bifida patients, that a high proportion of them were from mothers who had taken these pregnancy tests. And she raised the alarm in 1967. Now, bear in mind that this drug stayed on the market until 1978. So more than 10 years before it was taken off the market, the alarm was raised. And a lot of what we look at in this documentary is why the authorities didn't act sooner with this first concern about the drug. Because by 1975 they had placed a warning on the packet saying that it shouldn't be used in pregnancy because it could cause malformations. Now the key thing is, well, you say, oh well, then it's already been proven, but it hadn't been proven conclusively. And the key thing is that the claimants who feel that they have had all sorts of malformations from this drug had a case in 1982 that fell through. And this case was really kind of crucial. There was, by this point, around about 700 families who clubbed together to try and work together with a group of MPs as well, calling for an inquiry. And they had tried to prove that this drug would cause the malformations, be it heart defects. We've met people with spinal problems. We've met people with shortened limbs. We've met people who have been brain damaged, who all claim that it was caused by taking this drug. And what happened was the court case fell through for various reasons, which we explore in the documentary. So at that point, really, the whole thing kind of collapsed and nothing happened. Then what happened is that the children who had been affected by these drugs, or allegedly affected by these drugs, grew up. And they started asking questions. And I met one of them in Liverpool in 2011, a guy called Carl Murphy. And in his loft, he had all these documents, and he invited me to come and have a look at them. And I could see now the research. I could see Isabel Gall's report, who I was mentioning earlier. I could see that there was stuff from the Royal College of GPs that also showed a potential problem with the drug. And so we started to have concerns about this, and we tracked down some of the report authors. So we spoke to Isabel Gall. She said she'd been campaigning for 10 years to try and get this drug off the market, but nothing had happened. We spoke to another guy called Dennis Cook was his name. He was a statistician, and he'd done some really interesting research. What he'd done is he looked at the number of deformities in the country and the sales of this drug, and he had found a complete correlation between the sales of Primodos and the number of deformities. Now, of course, it could be all sorts of other different factors, but when he looked at this, he told the company this is really rather alarming, and he called for additional tests to be done. I've got a question in here from Ivana who asks, isn't it a bit late now? Why is it important to expose it now? Yeah, I mean, it's still important because these people are still alive, and they feel that they have not had justice, that they've not had compensation. I suppose the other reason why it's important is when you look at regulatory failures, you want to make sure that those sort of things can't happen again. And can you learn lessons from 40 years ago? Well, you know, we talk about exposing Jimmy Savile from the 70s. Were there lessons to be learned there? You know, people suddenly realised the prevalence of paedophilia with the Jimmy Savile case and the problems of people in authority, and loads of other people came forward. So I think it's as relevant now, especially as you still have people alive. And as one person said to me, you know, why is it important? Because we need to know the truth. Simple as that. So that's the answer to that question. Abina said, who is responsible for Primodos? So Primodos was produced by a company called Shearing, a German company. They were taken over in 2006 by pharmaceutical giant Bayer. So Bayer actually currently hold the responsibility. And Shearing and Bayer both say that the drug was on the market in compliance with all the prevailing laws, and they believe that the evidence for it causing malformations was extremely weak. So we have had that response from them. We haven't had an interview with them. Christopher asked, did you ever imagine your documentary would be screened in Parliament? No, I didn't. I didn't imagine that people would be writing about it, talking about it, and we'd be screening it in Parliament. In fact, when I first found the documents and when I first started working on it, we were just going to do it as a news report, yeah, we'll have. Is that a cup of tea going there? Oh, thank you. Just to keep myself. So we were originally going to do it as a news report, and we. I actually went to my lawyer, expecting him to kind of like say, okay, well, these are the things you've got to change, and I showed him all the documents that we'd got from Berlin, and he's looked at it and said, you know, you need to do something more substantial than this. You need to make this into a documentary. So it was actually the lawyer's idea. The lawyer's the guy who normally shuts everything down. It was the lawyer who said, let's open this up, let's look at this a little bit more closely. Some of the things in here you need to explore, and to have that support and then the support of the editors as well to make it into a documentary was amazing. So I never thought that it would be screened in Parliament, and that you know, that was fantastic. What's it been like seeing the reaction of the press, public and the government this week? Amazing, just amazing, because you know, I've done this story before. I did it in 2011, did it in 2014, and you know, felt like it was just something that I was doing. And I've seen other people do it. I've seen other people interview people, but it didn't feel like anyone else was really kind of digging into the story. And to see reaction, we've had now reports all around the world. Bizarrely, New Zealand has been doing loads of stuff on this, doing their own digging, putting their own pressure on the company, because it was sold globally. And this is one of the things that we haven't talked about in the news reports that we've done, we haven't talked about in the paper reports that we've done, but we do talk about in the documentary is the global aspect of this, and particularly in America. And we explore America quite a lot. In fact, really, there's a lot more than goes in even to the documentary about the global sales. It was sold in Australia, New Zealand, India. It was actually banned a lot sooner in a lot of other countries. So, for example, Sweden and Norway banned it around the 1970s, 1971, as soon as they saw the original kind of reports and had concerns about it. So the British authorities were slow to react on this in comparison to some of the other regulatory bodies, and that's one of the things that we look at, and that's one of the things that we are quite concerned about in the documentary, and that's really the crux of it. Back in sort of 1975, when they did finally get a study out, the regulator contacted the manufacturer and told them about the level of risk, but didn't tell the general public, and from the records it shows that he destroyed the materials on which his research was done, and he actually says that he has done that to frustrate the claimants. And this is extraordinary, because this is a man who is employed to protect the public from dangerous medicines. He's just discovered a danger, potential threat. What does he do? He protects the manufacturer, and that seems quite extraordinary. Is it still in use? No, it's not still in use. This is not a current threat. I mean, I would say this is not something that people are taking now. Do you get used to dealing with emotional, sensitive stories as a journalist? Yeah, you do. I mean, obviously we've just had one here in Westminster, a really horrific story, I've dealt with lots of emotional stories. Do you get used to it? No, I don't think you do. I get really affected by interviewing people, sometimes choke up, which is very embarrassing. Sometimes get more choked than the person I'm interviewing. Wives who've lost their husbands in war, parents who've lost their children is the toughest one, I think, and that's why this is so brilliant that these people were able to talk about it, because not only do they feel that they've been wronged, but also probably they feel a little bit guilty that they took this drug, and they shouldn't, but they do, and so it's quite difficult for them to talk about it, because if their child died, which is at least a couple of the case studies that we've done as a result, or they feel as a result, then that is extremely heartbreaking for them to tell that story, because they do feel in part responsible. Why did I take this pill? They keep asking, and always ask, why did I take these drugs? So that is really hard. Teresa said, how many women are using this drug in the US? That's a good question, which I do not know the answer to, and I think that is worth exploring. I see you're from California. We know about this. I'll just give you a little bit away about the documentary. We followed a case in Wyoming, which is fascinating, which kind of links back to the UK, and it's kind of comes at the end of the documentary, and I think that's kind of a breakthrough moment for us, really, when we explore that, and it's something we haven't talked about in the press much, but that really is staggering. I will tell you that the drug there was called Gestest. It was made by a company called Squibb, but it was licensed from Germany. I think I'll probably end it there. I just wanted to give you a flavour of it. Please try and watch. I challenge anyone to not be shocked by what we've discovered, but also inspired, because these are families who have campaigned for a tremendously long time to try and get to the bottom of what's happened, and I think we have uncovered some very, very interesting revelations. So I do hope that 9 o'clock tonight on Sky News you have a little watch. Here's a trailer to see what you're going to see.
There was absolutely no reason to give a healthy woman a drug to test to see if she's pregnant.
Babies have suffered. Babies have died, babies have been deformed, babies have had no life.
If it's never been tested, why use it on us?
There is no word for the amount of anger I have for a company that does that.
Why does it matter? Because ultimately you need to know the truth.